The United Kingdom is experiencing something that hasn't been seen since the 1950s. Living standards are collapsing at a rate that's leaving millions of British families unable to afford basic necessities. And what's happening right now in late 2024 is about to get much, much worse. The data coming out of Westminster and the Bank of England paints a picture so bleak that government officials are reportedly holding emergency meetings behind closed doors, desperately trying to figure out how to prevent a complete economic meltdown. What you're about to discover will fundamentally change how you view the UK's economic future, and more importantly, it'll show you exactly why your money is worth less today than it was yesterday, and why tomorrow it'll be worth even less. Before we dive into this economic catastrophe, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to Economy Reporter to stay ahead of all the latest UK economic and housing news that directly impacts your wallet. What the government doesn't want you to know about the employment figures they're celebrating, that 5% unemployment rate they keep mentioning. It's a carefully crafted illusion designed to hide the real crisis that's destroying British workers. The truth is that underemployment has exploded to levels not seen since the darkest days of the 2008 financial crash. We're talking about millions of people desperate to work more hours but trapped in part-time positions that don't pay enough to cover basic bills. These aren't lazy people looking for handouts. These are teachers, nurses, retail workers, and skilled tradespeople who can't find enough work to survive. The Office for National Statistics buried this data deep in their reports, but when you dig through the numbers, you find something terrifying. Nearly 3.2 million workers are crying out for more hours, representing almost 10% of the entire workforce. Meanwhile, another 2.7 million people have completely given up looking for work, driven out of the labour force by long-term sickness that mysteriously surged after certain global events we're not supposed to question. Zero-hour contracts have become the new normal, with employers treating human beings like on-demand robots they can switch on and off whenever profits dip. Young people entering the workforce today face a reality where a good job means getting guaranteed shifts for more than 2 weeks at a time. The gig economy that was supposed to liberate workers has instead created a new underclass of people who don't know if they'll earn enough next week to keep the lights on. But the employment disaster is just the appetizer to the main course of economic destruction. Inflation might officially be dropping, but anyone who actually shops for groceries knows the truth. Food prices have gone up 30% in 2 years, and they're never coming back down. That's not a temporary spike, that's a permanent reduction in your standard of living. Energy companies are still charging rates that would have caused riots 10 years ago, but we've been so beaten down by crisis after crisis that we just accept it now. The average household is spending £3,000 more per year just to maintain the same lifestyle they had in 2021. Where's that money supposed to come from when wages have only increased by a fraction of that amount? The government's own data shows real wages have fallen by 3%, even after the supposed generous pay rises in the public sector. Private sector workers have it even worse, with many companies using the threat of AI and automation to suppress wage demands. The most insidious part is what economists call shrinkflation, where products get smaller but prices stay the same or go up. That chocolate bar you love? It's 20% smaller than it was 3 years ago. Your favourite cereal? The box is the same size, but there's less inside. Companies are literally stealing food off your table while maintaining the illusion that prices are stabilising. Quality is plummeting across every sector as businesses cut corners to maintain profit margins. The chicken you buy today contains more water, the clothes fall apart after 3 washes, and don't even get me started on what's happened to customer service. Now, let's talk about the fantasy that interest rate cuts will save us all. The Bank of England faces an impossible choice that will devastate millions no matter what they decide. If they cut rates to help struggling mortgage holders and businesses, inflation could explode again, destroying what little purchasing power remains. If they keep rates high to fight inflation, the housing market collapses and takes the entire economy with it. Governor Andrew Bailey knows this, which is why his recent speeches sound like a man preparing the public for disappointment. The mortgage time bomb that everyone forgot about is still ticking away beneath the surface. Over 1.4 million households will see their fixed-rate mortgages end in 2025, moving from rates around 2% to potentially 6% or higher. That's an average increase of £500 per month for a typical family home. How many households can absorb that kind of hit when they're already struggling with everything else? The answer is virtually none, which is why building societies are quietly preparing for a wave of defaults that could make 2008 look like a practice run. Savers who did everything right, who lived within their means and put money away for retirement, they're being systematically robbed through negative real interest rates. Your savings account paying 4% interest means nothing when real inflation for the things you actually need to buy is running at 8% or higher. This is a deliberate wealth transfer from responsible savers to reckless borrowers, engineered by a political class that needs to keep the debt bubble inflated at all costs. The housing market's collapse is happening in slow motion, hidden behind carefully massaged statistics and estate agent propaganda. The Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, RIS-ES, just released data showing prices are falling across the UK, but you won't see that headline in the mainstream media. They'll tell you about resilient prices in London or steady demand in the southeast. But the reality is that outside of a few wealthy postcodes, the market is frozen solid. First-time buyers have been completely priced out, with the average deposit now exceeding £60,000 in many areas. That's more than most people earn in 2 years before tax. The government's help schemes are just corporate welfare for big builders, inflating prices further while creating more debt slaves. The landlord exodus is accelerating as tax changes and regulations make buy-to-let unprofitable for all but the largest corporate investors. Over 400,000 rental properties have been sold in the last 3 years, and they're not being replaced. This is creating a rental market apocalypse where remaining properties see bidding wars with dozens of desperate tenants offering months of rent up front. Students can't find accommodation, young professionals are living in their childhood bedrooms into their 30s, and families are being forced into temporary accommodation that costs councils billions while destroying lives. The foreign investment flood that's supposedly supporting the market is actually the final phase of Britain's transformation into a colony owned by overseas wealth funds. Entire neighbourhoods in London, Manchester, and Birmingham are being bought up by sovereign wealth funds and oligarchs who leave properties empty as financial instruments. This brings us to the wealth gap that's not just growing but exploding into something resembling feudalism. The divide between asset owners and everyone else has reached proportions that would make Victorian industrialists blush. If you owned property or stocks before 2020, you've seen your wealth increase by 30 to 50% doing absolutely nothing. If you work for a living, you've gotten poorer every single day. This isn't capitalism. It's a rigged system where work is punished and ownership is rewarded beyond all reason. The generational wealth transfer that was supposed to flow from baby boomers to younger generations has been reversed. Instead of inheritance, young people are watching their parents' wealth get extracted through care home costs, equity release schemes, and medical expenses. The average inheritance has dropped by 20% in real terms, while the age at which people receive it has increased to 61. By the time millennials inherit anything, they'll be too old to use it for building a life. The UK is rapidly transforming into what economists call a rentier economy, where a tiny elite extracts wealth from everyone else through rent, interest, and fees. You pay rent for housing, rent for software, rent for entertainment, rent for transportation. Nothing is owned. Everything is a subscription that can be raised or cancelled at any time. Foreign ownership of British assets has reached critical levels with entire sectors of the economy effectively controlled from overseas. Your water company, your trains, your energy supplier, they're all sending profits abroad while British consumers pay some of the highest prices in Europe for deteriorating services. Budget 2025 was supposed to be the moment when the government finally admitted the scale of the crisis and took radical action. Instead, we're getting more of the same managed decline disguised as difficult decisions and responsible governance. Tax rises are coming, but they'll hit exactly the wrong people in exactly the wrong way. The wealthy have already moved their money offshore, or into tax-efficient structures that armies of accountants have spent decades perfecting. The middle class, what's left of it, will bear the brunt through stealth taxes, fiscal drag, and the continued freeze on thresholds that pushes minimum wage workers into higher tax brackets. The promise of increased public investment has already been watered down to meaningless levels. We need hundreds of billions in infrastructure spending to compete globally, but we're getting pocket change that won't even maintain what we have. Schools are literally falling down, hospitals are using equipment from the last century, and our transport infrastructure would embarrass a developing nation. The NHS is at breaking point not because of winter pressures or demographic changes, but because of deliberate underfunding designed to manufacture consent for privatisation. The same playbook is being run on every public service: starve it of resources, point to the inevitable failures, then sell it off to connected insiders who'll charge more for less. Political paralysis has reached the point where everyone knows what needs to be done, but nobody has the courage to do it. We need a complete overhaul of our tax system, a massive public investment programme, and a fundamental restructuring of our economy away from financial engineering toward actual production. Instead, we get committees studying committees while the country slides toward irrelevance. So what does all this mean for you sitting there watching this video, wondering if there's any hope left? Let me paint you 3 scenarios for what's coming in 2025 and 2026. The optimistic scenario, and I use that term loosely, sees inflation moderating to around 4%, interest rates dropping to 3.5%, and the economy stumbling along at near zero growth. You'll be poorer, but not catastrophically so. The realistic scenario sees another external shock, maybe energy prices spiking again or a global recession, pushing the UK into a prolonged downturn with unemployment hitting 7 to 8% and living standards dropping another 5%. The pessimistic but increasingly likely scenario sees a sterling crisis as international investors lose faith in the UK's ability to pay its debts, leading to IMF intervention and Greek-style austerity that makes current cuts look generous. Your everyday life is about to change in ways you're not prepared for. Shopping will become a strategic operation where you buy essentials in bulk when on offer because you know prices will be higher next month. Heating your home will be a luxury you ration. Wearing extra layers indoors becomes normal. Forget about discretionary spending. Every pound will be scrutinised and most pleasures will be sacrificed. Travel will become a distant memory for most as the cost of fuel and tickets prices out ordinary families. The historical parallels are frightening. We're following the same path as Argentina in the 1970s, a once wealthy nation that destroyed itself through political incompetence and economic mismanagement. The differences are that we're doing it more slowly and with better PR, but the destination is the same: a formerly prosperous country reduced to irrelevance while its people wonder how it all went so wrong. The Victorian-era comparisons everyone makes are actually too optimistic. At least the Victorians were building things, creating industries, expanding globally. We're managing decline, selling off the family silver, and pretending that financial engineering can replace actual economic activity. This is the reality of the UK economy as we head into 2025. It's not a recession or a crisis in the traditional sense. It's a slow-motion collapse of living standards that will define the next generation. The political class won't save you because they're either benefiting from the current system or they're too afraid to challenge it. The Bank of England can't save you because they're out of tools that actually work. The only question remaining is whether you'll prepare for what's coming or whether you'll be another casualty of the greatest economic disaster in modern British history. The data doesn't lie, the trends are clear, and time is running out to protect yourself and your family from what's about to unfold. This is Economy Reporter, bringing you the unfiltered truth about the UK economy that nobody else will tell you.